If you've ever watched your dog right before they fall asleep, you've probably noticed something that feels oddly specific, almost ritualistic, like they're following a pattern that doesn't quite make sense on the surface. They circle, sometimes once, sometimes multiple times. They scratch at the spot, even if it's already perfectly soft. They pause, adjust, reposition, and then do it all over again, as if something still isn't right. And then, finally, they lie down. At first glance, it looks harmless, maybe even a little cute. One of those small quirks that make dogs feel more expressive, more alive, more like individuals with their own habits and preferences. But what if I told you that this behavior isn't random at all? What if that small routine, that circling, that scratching, that precise positioning, is actually something much older, something deeply wired into your dog's brain long before they ever had a bed, a home, or even you? Because here's the part most people don't realize. Your dog isn't just getting comfortable. They're doing something that once meant the difference between safety and danger. And even though your living room is safe, even though there are no predators, no threats, no uncertainty about where they are, their brain doesn't fully operate on that logic. It operates on instinct, ancient instinct, the kind that doesn't disappear just because the environment has changed. So when your dog circles before lying down, when they scratch or adjust the space beneath them, they're not just preparing to sleep. They're following a behavior that was once necessary for survival. And what makes this even more interesting is that the way your dog does it, how often they circle, how intensely they prepare their spot, even how they position their body at the end, can actually tell you something about how they feel, about their level of comfort, their sense of security, even their awareness of the environment around them. Because beneath what looks like a simple routine, there's a layer of communication most owners never notice. A silent signal, one that your dog repeats every single day, without realizing you might be watching. And once you understand what that behavior really means, you'll never look at that moment the same way again. Most people look at this behavior and assume it's about comfort, and to be fair, that explanation isn't entirely wrong, but it's incomplete in a way that hides what's actually happening beneath the surface. Because yes, your dog is trying to get comfortable, but not in the same way a human would adjust a pillow or pull a blanket. This isn't just about softness or position, it's about control over the environment, even if that environment is just a small space on the floor. From a human perspective, the spot already looks perfect. There's no visible reason to circle, no obvious need to scratch or reposition, and yet your dog behaves as if something still needs to be fixed. That's where the misunderstanding begins. Because what your dog is responding to isn't always visible. It's sensory, it's instinctive, it's tied to a system that prioritizes safety over convenience. In the wild, before domestication reshaped their lives, dogs didn't have prepared sleeping areas, they had to create them, and that process wasn't optional, it was essential. Circling helped flatten grass or vegetation, making the surface more stable and reducing the chance of discomfort or hidden threats. Scratching wasn't random either. It could expose anything underneath, from insects to small hazards, and at the same time, it allowed them to subtly mark the area with their scent, signaling ownership and familiarity. Even the direction they chose to lie down had meaning, often aligned with awareness of wind, scent flow, or potential movement in the surroundings. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Even though your dog no longer needs to do any of this to survive, their brain still runs those same checks, automatically, without questioning whether they're necessary. So when you see your dog circling on a perfectly clean bed, what you're actually seeing is a behavior that once solved real problems, still being executed in a world where those problems no longer exist. And that's why it feels strange. Because it is. It's a survival routine playing out in a safe environment. But there's another layer to this that most people completely miss. Because while the origin of the behavior is instinct, the way your dog performs it today is influenced by something else. Something more immediate. Something that reflects how they feel right now. And once you start paying attention to that difference, the behavior stops being just a leftover instinct and starts becoming a signal. What most people never realize is that this behavior exists on two levels at the same time, one rooted in ancient instinct, and the other shaped by your dog's current emotional state. And the way those two layers interact is what turns a simple routine into something much more revealing. Because while the circling and scratching started as survival behaviors, the intensity, the repetition, and even the hesitation before lying down are influenced by how your dog is feeling in that exact moment. A dog that circles once or twice and settles quickly is usually signaling something very specific: a sense of familiarity, a level of comfort with the environment, and a confidence that nothing around them requires further inspection. But when that pattern changes, when the circling becomes excessive, when the adjustments feel repetitive without resolution, or when the dog lies down only to get back up and repeat the process, that's no longer just instinct running in the background. That's awareness, heightened awareness, and sometimes mild tension. It doesn't necessarily mean fear, and it doesn't automatically indicate a problem, but it does suggest that your dog is taking longer to approve the space they're about to rest in, as if something even subtle is keeping them from fully relaxing. That something can be surprisingly small: a new smell in the room, a sound you barely notice, a shift in routine, even your own emotional state, because dogs are highly sensitive to changes in energy, tone, and behavior, often picking up on things long before we consciously recognize them. So when your dog circles more than usual or seems unable to settle, they're not being difficult, and they're not just being picky about comfort. They're processing, they're evaluating, they're trying to reach a point where their environment feels predictable enough to allow rest. And this is where the behavior becomes meaningful. Because unlike the original instinct, which was about physical safety, this modern version is often about psychological safety. Your dog isn't checking for predators in your living room. They're checking for stability, for signals that everything is as it should be. And the way they move, the way they hesitate, the way they finally choose to lie down, all of that reflects how quickly they arrive at that sense of security. Once you start seeing it this way, the behavior stops being just a habit and starts becoming a window, a small, repeated moment where your dog quietly tells you how they feel, not through sounds or actions meant to get your attention, but through something they would do even if no one was watching. And that's exactly why it matters. Once you understand both layers of this behavior, the instinctive and the emotional, something subtle begins to change in the way you see your dog, because what once looked repetitive or meaningless starts to feel intentional, almost like a quiet form of communication that was always there, just not interpreted. And this is where the real value of this behavior appears. Because your dog isn't just preparing a place to sleep. They're revealing how safe that place feels to them. Not in theory, not based on what you believe, but based on what they actually perceive in that moment. If your dog circles briefly, settles quickly, and relaxes into sleep without hesitation, that's a strong indicator that their environment feels stable, predictable, and secure. And that matters more than most people realize, because for a dog, the ability to rest deeply is directly tied to their sense of safety. But if the behavior changes, if they take longer, if they seem restless, if they repeat the process multiple times before settling, that's not something to ignore or dismiss as a quirk. It's feedback, subtle but consistent. And instead of trying to correct the behavior, the better approach is to observe it, to ask what might have changed, what might be different in the environment, the routine, or even in your own behavior that your dog is responding to. Because often, the adjustment doesn't need to happen in the dog. It needs to happen around them. Maybe the space feels too exposed. Maybe there's too much noise. Maybe something unfamiliar has shifted the sense of normality they rely on. Or maybe they just need a more defined, predictable place where they can rest without needing to evaluate it every single time. And when you respond to that, not by interrupting the behavior, but by understanding it, something important happens. Your dog stops needing to check as much. They settle faster. They relax deeper. And that small moment before sleep becomes smoother, quieter, almost effortless. Because at the end of the day, that strange little routine isn't strange at all. It's your dog making sure the world around them feels right before they allow themselves to fully let go. And once you start paying attention to that moment, you're no longer just watching your dog fall asleep. You're understanding how they experience safety.